We have Friday Night Lights, and it's time to preview the action. Who needs to make a statement? Virginia Tech quarterback Kyron Drones as they face off against Miami and Cam Ward. We're going to discuss this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. You know I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. Can you talk to him, baby?
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listener is greatly appreciated. DP, college football. Friday preview. We have a couple games for the Friday slate, DP. We're talking about, we have Virginia Tech versus Miami, right? At Miami. They're playing in Miami. Then we have Washington at Rutgers. So you know what we're going to do, right? We're going to talk about these prospects, which guys have to make a statement in those games. Then we're going to go through the second tier prospects, right? And then we're going to wrap that thing up with the sleeper prospects. Yes, nobody's talking about them. DP's going to ring the bell, tell everybody, wake up. DP, let's get into it.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Make a statement. Keith, this guy truthfully probably could have gone in the sleeper portion, but you know I like my name pulls. When you look at Rutgers, of course, we all know about Kyle Manunga, my guy, pounding the table for him since the summer. But on his offensive line, right? As any running back can tell you, I'm only as good as my O-line. You know, every running back can tell you that, Keith. He has a left tackle, Hollin Pearce, 6'8", 345 pounds at left tackle. This young man has experience at both left and right tackle. First 2 years of his career, he's well experienced. He has over almost 1,500 snaps at right tackle since 2021 when he became the starter on this offensive line. Last year he played predominantly left tackle, and this year he's playing predominantly left tackle. And just throughout these 3 games, 1 sack, 1 QB hit, only 4 combined pressures and hurries this season. Last year, 16 pressures and hurries combined, only 3 QB hits and only 1 sack allowed last year on passing downs. This is a big, physical, road grading offensive lineman. Keith, if you remember the HBCU kid, the big kid, for some reason I'm blanking on his name, but he went to Philadelphia. He got I think they got him after the draft. He's on the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, Anim Denkwa. And he was like 6'7", 6'8", 340 pounds, similar build and all that type of stuff. But the one thing I said, I wanted to see him play to the size you have. Be nasty in the run game. I don't have to ask that question of Hollin Pearce. He wants to move bodies. He wants to put guys in the dirt. And he's going to clear the way for Kyle Manunga. But I think for them against Washington is not so much just the run game, but keeping those pass rushers, those Samoan pass rushers that Washington always has, firing off the edge. When you do get in those true drop back sets, go ahead and make a statement that you're not just a great run blocker, but that you can contain explosive first step quickness type of pass rushers off the ball as well. With his experience, with his size, and he's got pretty decent movement skills at 344 pounds, Keith. He looks like DeJuan Jones a little bit. I don't know if his arm length is the same because DeJuan Jones' arm length was kind of crazy, even with his size when he measured in, but he looks like him as well. I think this guy has a big opportunity to really, especially after you look at the tackle class, and there's a lot of kind of hybrids, you know what I mean, in terms of, are you an actual tackle, or are you a guard? This guy to me is a tackle, and I think whether it's left or right, he's a guy that NFL teams need to keep their eye on Friday night.
Yeah, no, that's a name DP that I haven't heard of yet. So it should be rather interesting, right? Watching them and they're playing Washington at the end of the day. So it should be an interesting matchup and a matchup that to this point look like Rutgers honestly could win, right? And you just talk about Washington losing so many guys from last year's draft and obviously, kind of tailing off just a little bit. But DP, make a statement. I'm going with a big name, DP. I'm going with the quarterback for Virginia Tech, Mr. Kyron Drones, right? I'm sitting there, I'm looking at his stats on the season, right? And this is a guy that people liked. And if people aren't familiar, right, I believe he's on a podcast with, it's Shador Sanders, him, and Cam Ward, right? Well, guess what? He's facing Cam Ward this week on Friday night. And his stats so far, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, right? As far as passing. Then rushing, he has 2 touchdowns. Completion percentage is at 59.8, so right at 60%. And then you're just looking at it overall, passing yards, he's at 765, and that's through 4 games, DP. So you're looking at the average, right? I want to say it's not great. Even looking at the schedule, played well against Vanderbilt the very first game. He had almost 67% completion percentage, and Vanderbilt and Marshall, and then Old Dominion, his game was mostly rushing, right? He had 12 carries for 117 yards and a touchdown. And then against Rutgers, 60 yards rushing, but then he had 130, so 7 yards passing and no touchdowns and an interception. So one very inconsistent play, and I would say very inconsistent for the dual threat thought that he's to be, right? Because the 117 yards is by far more than the combined other 3 games. He had 19 yards against Vandy, 13 yards rushing from Marshall, and then he has 60 yards rushing from Rutgers, which is what is the consistency factor, right? And then also, where are you contributing to the team, whether it's passing or rushing? But when your passing is at 130 yards, and then your rushing is at 60 yards, and it's like, okay, we need something to elevate, right? At the end of the day, and he has a big time showdown against Miami Friday night. That's almost prime time in a sense, right? Because it's not many other games on. This week is one other game, but you will be the feature game, an ACC matchup facing a top 10 Miami, right? Facing a Cam Ward, a quarterback that everybody's really excited about. Everybody's going to be looking at you. And I think Virginia Tech is going to come in there, play scrappy defense, right? They have a couple defenders that are definitely draft prospects on that side of the football. Then it's like, hey, how many plays can you make? And then how many negative plays can you prevent also? And I think that's what it's going to be for Kyron.
I think, with Kyron, it's the same thing I said about Jaquinda Jackson when Arkansas played Oklahoma State, Keith. I said, if you're Jaquinda Jackson, you know that the scouts are coming to see Ollie Gordon at the running back position. Mm-hmm. When they leave, they need to have as many notes about you rather than put as many notes about Ollie Gordon, and Jaquinda Jackson outplay Ollie in that situation. Well, Kyron, it's the same situation for you. You're coming into a game where Cam Ward is, for a lot of people right now, Keith, QB1 throughout this season for the 2025 NFL draft. And if that remains the same, Kyron, you can go out, the scouts that are going to be there, the GMs or whoever's going to be in the building in terms of NFL personnel, they're coming to see Cam Ward, QB1 for Miami. Go ahead and give them a reason to jot your name down and say, listen, we got to check the tape for him. Because like you said, Keith, 322 yards against Vanderbilt, right? Kind of a nice start to the season. Even though he lost, the defense got Vanderbilt for however that happened. Vanderbilt destroyed Virginia Tech's defense that game, but he played well. And then Marshall, 130, Dominion, 176. Against Rutgers last week, 137 yards passing, 1 interception, 48% completion. Like he hasn't cracked 70% completion on the season. This is a big statement for him that he needs to make, and not just because at the end of the day we know that yes, you have to be athletic. You have. I don't want to say have to, but teams want an athletic quarterback nowadays, right? When you see what Lamar can do, Mahomes and Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, you want that, but you have to be a competent passer as well, and that's going to be the statement that he needs to make against this team. We saw Byron Brown that I highlighted last week, Keith, against this Miami defense. He was running the ball. He was powering through them. He made some good throws. One of his receivers ended up cracking 100 yards. Kyron, can you do the same thing and give your team a chance to knock off right now the leader in the ACC?
I agree with DP. Let's keep unfolding this thing, man. We talked about the make a statement guys, right? Let's go with those second tier prospects, those guys that we may have graded well in the summer that are on in season now. We want to talk about those guys that maybe not highlight names, right? But people know about. So let's get into that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And you think about it being the family season, the holiday season, going to live events and live shows with your family. If you have a family of 4, 5, 6 even, it's difficult to find seats that are side by side consecutive where you're sitting next to each other. Heck, even for a family of 3, it's not easy. But that's why Game Time Picks exists. It can help you filter through all of the fluff. Also with Game Time, I love the fact that they show the seat views for every seat in the venue before you purchase, and that is a great vantage point. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Second tier prospects to watch, Keith, on Friday night. I have to stay with Miami. And their leading receiver, Xavier Restrepo, Keith. Like, this young man is balling right now.
Yep.
He's 20 of 26, 361 yards receiving, averaging over 18 yards per catch. He has 5 receiving touchdowns. Of course, he is a slot receiver through and through, right? Listed at 5'10", 200 pounds. Right now we'll get the verified stuff, once we get to the combine and everything. But in terms of where he's winning the most to me and where he's been the mostly impressive is after the catch. He's averaging 7.4 yards per reception after the catch. 147 of his 361 yards have came after the catch, Keith. Like, he is making that connection between him and Cam Ward has been outstanding to watch. They know he knows where, like, Cam knows where Xavier is going to be. Xavier knows where Cam needs him to be. And Cam's giving him the football with great placement, so then he can easily catch and turn into a runner. And he's out there like that. He had a catch against USF, matter of fact, where I think it was a back shoulder fade, and I didn't think he was going to come down and bound because, again, he's listed at 5'10". He might be 5'9". Mm-hmm. I didn't think, that's typically not a catch that you see shorter receivers make on the sideline. But he was able to get one foot down, a body control, corral a catch. He looks like the Danny Amendolas, the Julian Edelmans that we've seen in New England for years. He looks like that type of slot receiver. Josh Downs, different guys like that. Like, I'm really impressed with him, and I think this is a guy whose stock has risen for me. Where, like, maybe in the summer he was looked at as a day 3 prospect. I think he keeps playing this way. He's headed to a day 2, like a late day 2, maybe mid day 2 selection.
Yeah, I agree. And he was going to be one of my second tier prospects also. And it's just based off of instincts, right? This guy just has a natural feel for the game. And that's what you start to understand when you evaluating prospects, right? And even at my time at LSU, DP, it wouldn't always necessarily be the guys that were the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. I always say this, just having an innate ability to understand how to get open, right? I remember Russell Gage when I was there, right? Slot wide receiver. Nobody was high on him, but he made it to the NFL and played a few years, right? When there were other guys that we recruited that was 6'3", 230 pounds, ran a 4.3, right? Those type of things. And then you had this guy who was 5'10", 180 pounds, right? Came out of nowhere, didn't know if he was going to play wide receiver or corner, right? And then played a few years for the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm with you on Xavier Restrepo. I'm going to go with running back Damian Martinez. Keep an eye on him and see what he's doing, right? Because right now, everything, DP, to be completely honest, right, it's been a fairly slow start. He had 15 rushes for 65 yards against Florida, right? FAMU, he had his most yardage, 90 yards, right? Ball, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was just a blowout because he just had 3 rushes for 3 yards. And then USF last week, he had 11 rushes for 31 yards. So through 4 weeks, DP, that's 190 yards, right? So that's somewhere around less than 50 yards, right? Somewhere in between 45 and 50 yards per game. And this was a guy that talk about one of the transfer portal pillars, right? Like him transferring from Oregon State to Miami, like caused a lot of ruckus. And it was, it was a lot of craziness going on. But this could be one of those examples where you might should have stayed where you were, right? Like just overall, right? Because you were getting the production, the offense fit you, right? Like it was centered around you. You were the featured guy, things like that. And then now I'm saying second tier prospects to watch out for because we know that there's talent there, right? And the people we talked to in the circles, right, had third, fourth round grades on them, but we know with running backs, right, you lack the production. That third, fourth round grade can easily turn into a sixth round grade quickly, right? So definitely a guy to keep your eyes on. And then I'm gonna say another guy that transferred. Production is not as high. Sammy Brown, right? Sam Brown. And I believe he's a guy that both of us were high on that liked him a lot. Like talking about a wide receiver that was 6'2, 6'3. 190 pounds, smooth mover, explosive, could run routes. I was very impressed with him. I believe he was a Houston transfer into Miami and just has an impressive skill set to where you kind of set there and thought it was like, hey, this guy goes to Miami and produce. He can be a top 50 into the back end of the first round type of prospect, but thus far the production just hasn't been there. So Miami has, you talk about Cam Ward at the very top, right? But just talent under him. We just named off three names: Xavier Restrepo, Damian Martinez, and Sam Brown. They have those guys that support systems. And I'll say this: some of those guys are going to have to step up if Miami wants to win the ACC, right? They're going to have to step up, and we're going to check and we're going to see Friday night.
No, they have to step up. The thing with Martinez, which is so interesting to me, is that like it seems like they're trying to figure out their run situation in Miami. Because it's like you have right now, Martinez, I think after the game last week, is now their leader in carries. Like we had like 11, you know what I mean? I think he was tied at the time with Jordan Lyle, or Jordan Lyle is right behind him at 29. But Jordan Lyle is the leading rusher with 233 yards, while Martinez has 194. You have three running backs with over 20 carries on the season. Mark Fletcher, who was there last year, Jordan Lyle, and then Damian Martinez. It feels like there's not an actual rhythm to the, I always say this about running backs because I played the position. Like it's a per touch type of position. Like you need to get a feel for the defense you're playing. Is this a speed defense? Is this a power defense? How are they reacting? What's their instincts like? You can't really get a feel or a gauge for that when you're 5 carries here, 2 carries next quarter, and you're just splitting it up. It's hard for guys to get into a rhythm, and I think that's really hurt because they need to get the run game going, because then that takes that onus and that weight off of Cam, so we don't see Cam make those back-breaking mistakes because he's trying to be Superman because you're putting him in those positions. So they need to get that run game going, Keith. I want to go to Washington real quick. Ephesians Prysock, they're both 6'3", 6'4", long, those cover 3 kind of corners. And for him, I remember him, he, to me, is a pure cover 3. Not saying that I will put him in man, but I will put him in man against the specific type of receivers. He's got to dictate. He's got to dictate the action. He wants to press and things like that. If you get him against some of these really twitched up guys who can force the gate to swing and open before he's really ready and comfortable, you can get to him. But so far in the season, he's playing pretty decent ball, man. Targeted I believe he's been targeted 14 times, only allowed 6 receptions for less than 100 yards total. He hasn't given up a single touchdown, and he has 2 PBUs on the season. Big, tall, long arm kid, has the height and everything. Now against this team that you're going to try and load the box, stop Kyle Monangai, and force them to throw it. Can you then make plays, give your offense the ball? Because Will Rogers, who transferred from Mississippi State, is their quarterback at Washington, and he's been playing really good ball. 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They're 3-1, I believe Washington is, while Rutgers is 3-0. This should be a good game.
Yeah, I agree 100% with DP. It's time to wake them up, baby. So get the alarm clock going. Hit the buzzer, DP, because we're about to talk about those sleeper prospects to talk about for the Friday slate coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch or a feeling in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. And when you talk about placing bets, guys, I know we talked in the preseason about MVP odds, Heisman odds, Super Bowl odds, college football playoff odds, all of that. But now things have shifted. Once games went live and we get real football, those odds have shifted. So get in on the action with the newest and latest odds for those specific bets, guys. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. When you place your first $5 bet, you will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you need to do is go to FanDuel.com and get in on the action. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Keith, it's time to hit that alarm button, and it's time for these fans to wake up on some of these sleeper prospects to watch in Friday night's action, whether it's Rutgers versus Washington, Miami versus Virginia Tech. Keith, I think I'm going to go to Rutgers real quick to their edge rush. Rutgers defense, unfortunately, has dealt with some injuries, to, losing their top two linebackers and everything. Yep. Tyrene Powell, I think he's been out since the first week because he was coming off of Achilles injury. And I don't know if he tweaked or anything, but he hasn't played since. And then they lost Mohamed Toure to another ACL. That's a big blow to that second level, man. So the front four has to get the job done. And kind of an underrated pass rusher and high effort guy, Aaron Lewis for Rutgers, 6'5", 265, almost 270 pounds. He's got like 6 pressures and hurries on the season, 2 QB hits. He hasn't closed on any sacks yet, but in this game against Will Rogers, and I think Washington still run, like Will Rogers comes from that air raid, open concept, drop back passing. Now they are running the football more. Like they do have a nice little running back there that they are trying to be balanced. But Aaron Lewis, I think, is a sleeper prospect that we need to keep our eyes on because they're going to need him, right? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, especially if you can dominate the game early, like we've seen them do to start this season, talking about Rutgers offense, get Kyle Monunga going, get the offense rolling, get points, and force Will Rogers to then throw the ball like 35, 45 times to stay in this game, right? Because when a team can run the ball, Keith, as you know, that speeds up the opposing offense because they're trying to make every single drive count because their defense can't get the run game off the field or stop and slow down the opposing rushing attack. If you can do that and put Will Rogers in those situations, Aaron Lewis is a guy that should be able to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback because they're going to need him to do that.
Yeah, DP, this is your second time mentioning him, but I want to cover him. Will Rogers, right? I think he's a sleeper prospect to talk about, obviously, with all the quarterbacks in this class. And, we're talking about the top of it. But can this guy continue to play fairly solid football into conference play, right? And then win some Big Ten games, right, that people weren't expecting him, and he plays good footballs. Right now on the season, he's sitting at 1,000 yards, right, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's not turning the football over. Even in their loss, DP, it seems like he played fairly well. 23 or 31, right? He had a 74 completion percentage, 315 yards, right? So that's, I think when you look at it, you say, okay, this guy's playing safe with the football, right? With a Mississippi State transfer, he went up there to Washington. He's playing safe with the football. He's playing fairly good football at this point. And I look at him and I'm saying, hey, this is a guy to kind of look out for because can Washington, like I said, I know they had a fall off, right? When you lose 2 first-round picks and Michael Penix and Rome Odunze, right? Like that's just going to happen. But can he, I guess, kind of stabilize this program and saying, hey, we may not make it to the national championship, right? But we can be contenders for being a 9-win team and people have us in the conversation for the playoffs. If we're not making a 12-team playoffs, we could be in the conversation. So I'm interested to watch DP on Will Rogers go out there and kind of sling the rock and see how does he handle certain pressure moments, right? How does he command the huddle and just see if he can be one of those quarterbacks when you talk about a top 10 ranking, right? Like, can he elevate his name up there to be one of those top 10 guys in this matchup? So I'm definitely checking out for Will Rogers as a sleeper prospect.
No, I like that kid. I mean, because they I don't think a lot of college football fans, knew that he was in Washington. Like he transferred from Mississippi State to go to Washington.
Probably like, I wonder what happened to him. Wonder where that guy was.
Right, like did he go to the NFL? Nope, he's right there in Washington, and he's like you say, he's playing really good ball.
Efficient,
just efficient, doing what he's. playing the point guard role for that team, distributing to their weapons, getting the run game going and everything like that. I want to go back to Miami's defense, Keith. We talked a lot about their offense. Francisco Muigoa, linebacker, 6'3", 230. Like, I remember he popped on the screen when I was watching them against USF. Because first thing, I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of a throwback name, college football name. Ray Malaga, I think is the name. Used to be linebacker for
Bengals.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, used to be at USC.
Yeah, I think for the Bengals. I thought he was about to say Ray Lewis. I was about to be like,
no,
okay.
no. I was not going to put that on this young man, Keith. That's GOAT tier. I can't do that to him.
And he played because Ray played at Miami too, so I thought that's the comp he was going with. I'm like, this guy about to say this guy is Ray Lewis. Okay, gotta check him out.
I'm not going to end his career like that, Keith. People start, DP said he's Ray Lewis, man. I got to get eyes on him. Nah, I can't do that to that young man. But so far on this, what I liked about watching him, he's a 3-down impactful player. Like, whether it's coverage, he drops off to his spots well, he covers well, they blitz on. I think he's like 2 sacks right now on the season, a couple hurries, but in the run game as well, he fills running lanes well. He's got 18 tackles, 13 run stops and stuffs. Like, this dude's all over the field. He's got great eyes for the football. He knows where the ball is. He has a nose for it. And you just think about, like, and that's the one part I don't think we've talked a lot about, this linebacker class for the 2025 NFL draft. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of talk, you know what I mean? Because some of the linebackers are kind of hybrids. Like, you know what I mean? Like Jalen Walker and Abdul Carter is like, well, you might be better suited at edge. So I might not talk about you as a linebacker. So just a name that, a sleeper name that nobody's really talking about. I believe this young man is also a senior. Yes, he started his career at Washington State and played, last year he transferred in, played for Miami, and he was an impact player he had 7 sacks last year as like an off-ball backer. He had 7 sacks, 15 hurries, like 59, almost 70-something tackles. Like, this dude gets after it, man. So I wanted to highlight him. This is a good football player. He popped on tape for me on screen during the game last week. He looked good on tape. I think he could have have a big impact, especially against a mobile quarterback like Kyron Drones. You need a guy like this that can mirror him the way he was able to mirror Byron Brown last week.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wrap this thing up, DP, real quick with Miami. Defensive tackle, right? Transfer from Tennessee. Tyler Barron has 4.5 sacks on the season, right? He had 3 against FAMU, 1 against Florida, half a sack versus Ball State. I'm sorry. And then USF, he didn't have any sacks. But man, you're talking about a guy that's starting off hot and potentially very productive, right? And I just want to watch this guy. He's listed at 6'5", 260 pounds, right? So you're talking about another maybe hand in the ground edge rusher, right, and play in a 4-3 scheme. And as we're trying to round out and, slot guys, right, this is where guys start to make themselves some money because they go from fairly unknown to like, hey, this guy's entrenched in the 3rd round, right? You talk about your Marshawn Nealons from last year and things like that. So I'm looking at Tyler Barron and saying, hey, this guy can play some productive football. And then he can elevate his draft stock, especially once they get into heavy ACC play. Because right now, obviously, his 3 sacks come against FAMU. But I think he can transition that and then jump into playing well in the ACC, elevate his draft stock. We know how this goes. Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl calls, right? You go up there, you play well, then boom, now all of a sudden you're a top 100 pick. So I'm going to wrap this up with Tyler Barron. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On NFL Draft. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. Like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. You know what time it is tomorrow, guys. We are previewing the rest of the college football slate. All right, make a statement, second-tier prospects and sleeper prospects as well for Saturday's games. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.